The question here isn't so much what is this car up against and is it any good? Here, the real question is what on earth is it? The answer to that is that this is the ORA Funky Cat. Now, ORA is a new Chinese brand from Great Wall. You may even remember Great Wall. They sold a pickup truck called the Steed in the UK for a very long time, actually. This, however, is very much new brand, new era for Great Wall and for ORA. This is the first ORA model to come to the UK. The Funky Cat is 5-door, small hatchback. It's actually similar in size to the Cupra Born. I think the styling makes it look smaller than that. But price-wise, size-wise, it's a rival to everything from things like the Peugeot E208 and even stuff like the 500e, right up to, like I said, the Cupra Born, MG4 and your Nissan Leaf, although the Leaf is actually a tiny bit bigger. So it really has got a lot of rivals out there. Now, in terms of the ownership stuff for ORA, well, you are going to be able to buy one from a dealership. They've tied up with a number of really well-established dealers throughout the UK. Plus, there are going to be sort of dedicated ORA smart hubs where you can go and find out all about the cars. And of course, you're going to be able to buy them online as well. This is the first model that the brand is bringing to the UK, and it's only being offered in this top spec first edition trim that we've got here. It's complete with a 48 kilowatt hour battery that's got a 45.4 kilowatt hour usable capacity, and that's good for a combined WLTP driving range of 193 miles. It costs just under £32,000 or from about £400 per month on finance with a reasonable deposit. There are going to be other trims available on the Funky Cat very soon, and not only that, there's also likely to be a longer range, bigger battery version, although ORA hasn't definitely confirmed that yet. Not only that, but it does have quite a lot of the ownership stuff that you're going to be looking for sewn up. So this comes with an 8-year, 100,000 mile battery warranty, which is pretty much industry standard, and it's got a 5-year unlimited mileage warranty on the car. Not only that, but I'm talking to you from January 2023, which I mentioned because the car market changes on an hourly basis at the moment. But right now you can order a Funky Cat in the UK and you can have it within a month, which is pretty impressive given the lead times on most other cars and EVs at the moment. It's a really compelling factor. So it really is quite impressive on that front. And what about the styling? I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? I've heard a lot of people say that there's something Porsche 911-ish about it, which I actually can definitely see. Something a bit mini, it just looks like kind of, I don't know, a 911 that swallowed a Mini or something along those lines. It looks like all kinds of different things. I do like the fact that it's quite smooth and friendly and cheerful looking. There's a lot of angular, aggressive looking cars these days. And I like the fact that the ORA is a bit different and just a bit odd, really. I quite like that. It's a bit novel, isn't it? I do think the back is just a bit strange. I can't quite figure out, it's just odd, isn't it, having all this sort of metal below the window. No rear windscreen wiper, which is a shame, but this light, I kind of expect it to sort of start talking to me like Kit from Knight Rider or something. At 228 litres, the Funky Cat's boot is really tiny by the standards of most electric family hatches, and it also has a rather high load lip which can make it difficult to lug heavy items in. There is a bit of cable storage underneath the boot floor, but you'll struggle to get 2 cables underneath there. And there's no storage in the front of the car either. So that is a big disappointment then with the boot. Not least because otherwise this is actually quite a good family car because there's loads of space in the rear seats here. For a small car, look at the leg room that I've got. Headroom, if you're sort of 6 foot, then that's probably going to be a bit sort of claustrophobic, but generally I think this is pretty good for rear space. So it's even more of a shame that the boot seems really quite limiting if you are a family motorist. You do get your central armrest here, and I have to say it all feels quite nice back here. You get your charging point, and while we're talking about this being a family car, safety, actually they've done really well. They've just scored really highly with Euro NCAP, full 5-star rating. So they've got everything right apart from the boot. So there are quite a lot of details that I like about the Funky Cat, not least it has fish that swim across the screens when you turn the car on. I find that sort of childishly sort of delightful. I think it's really cool. This dual tone interior, it's quite something, isn't it? It's not boring, let's put it that way. I like the fact that you can get it in all different colours. It is an option, the dual tone, but you do get the quilted leatherette seats as standard on the first edition. In fact, you get most things as standard on the first edition. You get your electric seats, although there's no lumbar. You get 360-degree reversing camera. You even get a camera down the side of the car when you indicate, so you can see cyclists and that kind of thing. It's useful. It's got all the tech you could want. There is even facial recognition, so you can set up a profile, and when you get in the car, it reads your face, just like your phone does quite often these days, and then it sets your preferences, which makes it all the more astonishing that you cannot get heated seats on this car. It doesn't have heated seats, you can't option heated seats. There are a lot of people out there that will not buy a car that don't have heated seats, so I think that's a bit a bit balmy. I don't really understand that. So that seems a bit crazy, but you do get your aircon, you get an interior that feels actually quite well finished. I have to say the actual build quality, perceived build quality is pretty decent. And I really like this sort of very slim steering wheel, sort of 2-spoke steering wheel. Very retro, very cool. I like that. As for the screen itself, that also has kind of most of the features you want. It's got the nav, it's got your radio, digital, Bluetooth, all of that stuff. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are not currently available on this car, which is a big downer. However, ORA does say that it will be automatically installed on over-the-air software updates in the summer this year, so all the cars are going to get it in a few months. So hopefully that will come soon, because that will be you know, a really big benefit. I know lots of people, again, who won't buy a car if it hasn't got Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. So other than that, the screen itself, it's fine, but a lot of the icons are quite small. It does respond quickly enough. It makes a lot of funky noises, this car, I have to say. I don't mind the actual usability of it, but I wish the icons were bigger. And I really find the aircon so infuriating, because it's really hard to even sort of change the temperature. It's a right faff, and it's just you know, just having ordinary aircon buttons would be so much easier to use. So that's a pain that you have to go into that screen, leave what screen you're on, and go in there. Even so, you've got your nav, you've got your radio. This driver's readout here is really lovely. Ultimately, it's really not a bad interior. It's just missing. It's got a few glaring errors, hasn't it, really? As for charging, the Funky Cat is a bit behind most of its peers. Plug it into a DC CCS rapid charger and it'll charge it up to 64 kilowatts, which will deliver an 80% top up in around about 40 minutes. That's a touch slower than a Kia Niro EV, for instance, but a lot slower than a Volkswagen ID3 or Cupra Born. Plug in at a 7 kilowatt home charger and it'll be fully charged in under 8 hours. And you also get a 3-pin domestic charging cable as standard, which is a nice addition, as most rivals do charge extra. Now for the fun bit, let's find out what the ORA Funky Cat is like to drive. Now, you're talking about a front-wheel drive car here. It's got 169 brake horsepower, and it will do 0 to 62 in about 8.3 seconds. So those are your kind of immediate facts. As for the performance, absolutely fine. It doesn't feel as urgent as rivals like the MG4. I spent a lot of time in the MG4 recently, and that feels much nippier at lower speeds. But this feels absolutely fine. You're going to have absolutely no qualms at all getting out of a junction into sort of fast-moving traffic, you know, fast merge, this kind of thing. The performance is just fine. It's adequate for what you want. In fact, I would say that sort of sums up everything about the way that the ORA drives. Ride comfort, it's actually really quite good, I think, over sort of long undulating, you know, when you get crests and dips in the road, it feels quite composed. It does get a little bit sort of thumpy and a little jarring over sharper edge potholes, or where you get road surfaces eroded. That gets a bit noisy and a bit more kind of intrusive, but it's never that bad. Not only that, the steering, actually quite pleasant. It's got quite a nice build of weight, it's quite predictable, that's all fine. Traction seems to be pretty decent, despite it being really quite icy and foggy today as well. It's really cold today, but it doesn't seem to do that thing that a lot of electric cars have, where you get a massive kind of wave of torque that tends to make it quite easy to get a lot of wheel spin in conditions like this. This seems to be pretty sedate, and it's very easy to get along with. It has got 3 different brake regen modes, which you have to access via the screen, which is another frustration with the icons being so tiny. So you go into the screen and you've got your different settings, and you can choose your standard driving modes. So you've got light, normal and strong brake regen. Strong actually is pretty easy to get on with. I don't know, I think it's fine. It's just annoying that you have to use the screen, because I quite like being able to toggle through regen modes on the steering wheel. I think that makes it easier to use and make the most of if you just want a stronger down a hill, that kind of thing. There is also a 1-pedal mode. It bleeds in quite nice and smoothly. You can use it around town or whenever you fancy, and it's easy to predict, and it's exactly what you want. Lots of people like 1-pedal driving around town. It makes the car more efficient, and all it is obviously the brake regen mode. It means that you lift the throttle off and it feels like the car is braking. What it's doing is harvesting energy and increasing the efficiency of the car, so you don't really need to use the brake pedal so much. It's just fine. It's one of those cars that is not inspiring to drive. It's not thrilling. There is talk of perhaps there being a GT model, which means that it could get a faster version. I don't personally think that it really needs it. I don't think it needs a dual motor. I think it's just fine being, you know, a more efficiency-focused, comfort-focused car. I think that's what people are going to want from it. And it does what you want. I think an MG is more fun to drive. I think an ID3 is more fun to drive. I think this is just a car that you buy and it does the job. And I suppose that's a bit disappointing to some, but for a lot of people, it'll be absolutely fine. I do want to point out that the visibility is quite poor in this car. So if you're looking behind you through the rear window, it's just quite narrow, so that's not great. And there's no rear windscreen wiper, which is a pain because in the UK you do get some really, really grubby times of year, this being one of them, and that gets obscured really quite quickly, so it's not great. Also, I thought, I mean, this relates more to the perceived quality in the car, I suppose, but I wanted to mention that the gear rotary selector on this car, it's a bit weird because it's quite loose and it feels quite cheap and plasticky. It's the only bit of the interior that I think actually really quite lets it down in terms of that sort of perceived quality. I do think they could do with improving the damping and the response on that, because it's quite slow to respond as well, so that's a little bit of a frustration. Other than that, like I said, the Funky Cat really does kind of do exactly what you want. It's just a bit difficult that there are others out there that do it better. We've only driven the ORA Funky Cat in really cold weather, which will cause any electric car's range to drop quite noticeably, and the ORA is no different. We saw a real-world range of around about 135 to 140 miles in fairly varied use, and we wouldn't be surprised if that dipped even further if you're doing solid motorway miles. In warmer temperatures, we'd expect the range to creep back up to around 160 to 180 miles depending on what road you're driving on. I like the Funky Cat. I like the fact that it's weird, maybe even a bit extrovert. I get the appeal of that, I really do, especially in a world where cars can seem like they're sort of becoming more and more samey in a lot of ways. But I've also been wondering why you would buy this car over alternatives like all of those cars I've mentioned, the MG4, the Peugeot E208, a Nissan Leaf, a Volkswagen ID3, all of this stuff that this car must compete with. And in truth, when I'm trying to think of objective reasons, I can't really think of any. And that's a bit tricky, isn't it? Because I like the car in isolation, but it doesn't sell in isolation, it's got to compete, and I don't think it really does well enough. So unfortunately, I don't think the Funky Cat is that recommendable. It's just that boot, the range, all sorts of weird and funky little kind of like annoying frustrations, the heated seats, all that stuff. It really kind of stacks up. Nonetheless, as I've said, ORA as a brand I think has real potential, and I think it will make big waves. I just don't think that the Funky Cat is going to be the model that's going to be its big break in the UK. Don't forget to head to CarGurus.co.uk for a whole host of fantastic used cars, including loads of electric cars. And while we've got you, please do like the video, subscribe to the CarGurus UK YouTube channel, and turn on your notifications, ring that little bell so that you don't miss any of our videos.